The light shone brightly across the CNN studio as Governor Sarah Huckabee Sanders adjusted her navy blazer, carrying composed assurance of someone convinced she had already secured victory. She wasn't just ready, she was confident. Confident that she could dismantle a rising Democrat with a few sharp sound bites and practiced outrage. Across from her sat Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, the 43-year-old representative from Texas, recognized for her strong principles, quick mind, and unapologetic style. Sanders had written her off as an easy opponent, but what followed over the next 20 minutes would upend that assumption and leave Sanders questioning her hold on political strength. This wasn't just another cable news debate. It became a lesson in political combat, and the experienced governor never saw it coming. Before breaking down the exchange, tap the like button if you're ready for a detailed look at one of the most striking debate moments in recent memory. And don't forget to subscribe with notifications on so you won't miss the turning point shaping U.S. politics. Let's rewind to the beginning. Inside the CNN studio, Anderson Cooper reviewed his notes as cameras locked into position. The topic, education policy, usually a safe arena, but not tonight. Sanders, former Trump White House press secretary and now Arkansas governor, had requested this matchup. She viewed Crockett as just another progressive newcomer, more about identity politics and results, someone who gave fiery speeches without substantive accomplishments. Backed by rising approval ratings and recent state-level legislative wins, Sanders assumed she could embarrass Crockett with ease. Her team had prepared, but their research lacked depth. They miscalculated Crockett's courtroom-tested discipline, her thorough knowledge of legislation, and most importantly, her ability to wait strategically for the right moment. Meanwhile, Jasmine Crockett sat calm and focused, reviewing her notes one last time. A former civil rights lawyer with years spent defending underserved communities, she had built a career on winning cases others considered hopeless and turning doubt into motivation. When CNN invited her, she accepted without hesitation. She studied everything, Anderson Cooper style, Sanders' record, and every law Arkansas had passed in the past year and a half. Sanders, in contrast, studied headlines. What made the encounter bigger than a debate was what each woman symbolized. Sanders stood for the Trump-era Republican base, direct, anti-woke, and seasoned from her years at the White House podium. Crockett represented the new Democratic wave, diverse, outspoken, and uninterested in political courtesies. This was about more than education. It was about the future of both parties, and the direction of the country. Education was a fitting stage. Sanders had recently signed laws restricting diversity programs and limiting classroom discussions on race and history in Arkansas. Crockett had opposed those efforts at the federal level. The divide was clear. Anderson Cooper opened with a straightforward question: what is your vision for the future of education in America? Sanders jumped in quickly. Her tone was sharp, her eyes fixed on Crockett. What we're seeing from Congresswoman Crockett and her progressive allies, she began, is a complete break from what American families want. While parents in Arkansas are focused on reading and math, she's busy advancing woke agendas that don't belong in classrooms. Sanders framed Crockett as an out-of-touch ideologue, more concerned with applause on cable news and actual student outcomes. She leaned heavily on her identity as both governor and mother, casting herself as a responsible voice. I've governed. I've implemented policy. I've listened to parents. What has Congresswoman Crockett done besides tweet and give speeches? The crowd stirred uneasily. Sanders pressed on. The truth is, people like her are why our kids are falling behind. They are more interested in indoctrinating than educating. With that, she leaned back, appearing satisfied with her opening attack. Then the camera shifted to Crockett. No panic, no hesitation, just steady focus. She drew a breath and delivered a counterpunch so precise it felt less like rebuttal and more like judgment. Well, Anderson, she began, calm but firm, I want to thank Governor Sanders for giving us such a clear example of what's wrong with today's conversation on education. Before I address her claims, let's talk about the facts she left out. She turned directly to Sanders. Governor, under your leadership, Arkansas ranks 48 in education, with the second highest child poverty rate in the nation. Over 200 teachers resigned this year due to underfunding. Those aren't opinions. That's your record. The room went still. Crockett pressed forward. You say I haven't done anything. I've litigated education equity cases across Texas. I fought to expand AP programs in underserved districts. I work to reform discriminatory funding models your party continues to defend. Then came the folder. Crockett pulled out a copy of House Bill 1228. Here's the bill you signed just last month, she said, holding it up. Section 3 prohibits teachers from discussing how historical events affect today's communities. Tell us, Governor, how does silencing history prepare students to think critically? Sanders stiffened. Crockett continued. And that's not all. The bill allows parents to challenge any material they find divisive, yet nowhere defines a term. As a fellow lawyer, you know vague language is legislative malpractice. So either you signed it knowing it would create confusion, or you didn't read it. Sanders blinked, fumbling. Well, that's not what the bill says. I just quoted it. Crockett cut in, holding up the page. If I'm wrong, then please, Governor, explain what it really means. Tell parents watching how this helps their kids learn. The trap had sprung. Sanders was on camera, unable to clarify her own law. And Crockett wasn't finished. One more thing, she said, pulling another document from her folder. This is your Department of Education's grant application from March, requesting $12 million in federal funds. Sanders' face tightened. This funding comes from the Educational Equity Enhancement Act. You know, the legislation I co-authored in Congress, the same one you just dismissed as progressive nonsense. Your state is applying for money from a law I wrote. The studio went quiet. But it doesn't stop there, Crockett added, pressing the point. The grant itself cites historical inequities in education as justification. So while you're banning teachers from discussing history, you apply for federal funds that require exactly that discussion. The contradiction is clear and undeniable, Crockett said, driving the point home. You claimed I only give speeches, but it's my legislation your state depends on to educate its children. So next time you attack a Democrat, make sure you're not relying on their ideas to fund your schools. Anderson Cooper tried to bring Sanders back in. Governor Sanders, how do you respond to the Congresswoman's point? But the damage was done. Sanders muttered something about federal funds and parental rights, but the authority had drained from her voice. She was no longer in command of the stage. Crockett, sensing the shift, pressed further. You accuse me of opposing parent involvement. Can you name one bill I've supported that prevents it? Just one? Sanders stayed silent, because she couldn't. That silence, broadcast live, carried more weight than any rebuttal could. Eventually, Sanders defaulted to her talking points. You back the Democratic agenda that puts union interest ahead of parents, she declared. It was a broad, familiar line, exactly the kind of vague claim Crockett had anticipated. That's not an answer to my question. Governor, Crockett shot back. I asked for a specific example. You gave me a slogan. So let me be clear. I've co-sponsored bills funding parent engagement programs. I've backed legislation requiring schools to provide families with regular progress updates. I've supported expanded after-school options to help working parents stay involved. Which of these exactly blocks parents from education? Again, no response. Sanders had nothing. Crockett had dismantled her attack point by point, showing it was rhetoric without substance. Even Cooper seemed taken aback by the reversal. What began as Sanders' confident opening had turned into a thorough breakdown of her credibility on education. But Crockett wasn't finished. Governor Sanders, she said steadily, you question my record and suggested I'm just another politician with empty words. That reflect your approach more than mine, and it helps explain why Arkansas continues to fall behind in education. She paused, letting the words settle before delivering her closing strike. Real leadership means doing the work, studying issues, building bipartisan solutions, and taking responsibility. You came here to deliver scripted attacks, not policy insight. Governance isn't built on assumptions, Governor Sanders. It's built on facts. While you've chased culture war headlines, I've written legislation that helps students learn. While you've signed laws that confuse teachers and parents, I've been building coalitions across the aisle to improve education. Desperation crept into Sanders' voice as she tried once more. Congresswoman Crockett, legislate all you want, but your party wants to fundamentally reshape American education in ways parents reject. But the words sounded hollow. The audience noticed. Cooper noticed. And Crockett noticed. Her final response landed with composed precision. Governor, the only thing I want to change are the outcomes for kids who are denied the education they deserve. If your definition of American values means trapping students in failing schools, silencing teachers, and choosing politics over solutions, then yes, I absolutely want to change that. The silence in the room was heavy. Sanders slumped, her debate strategy dismantled. Crockett, calm and measured, had broken down each attack. Cooper moved to close the exchange, but the political damage was done. Within minutes, Crockett's sharpest moments were trending online. Hashtags like #CrockettSchoolSanders spread nationally. Clips of her precise comebacks looped endlessly across TikTok and Twitter. The most replayed moment: Crockett holding Arkansas's federal grant application and asking Sanders why her administration accepted aid tied to historical inequities while banning related classroom discussions. Sanders' stunned reaction became a meme within hours. Even conservative media struggled to defend her. Fox News aired only the opening 5 minutes in their recap, skipping Crockett's dismantling of Sanders' record. Still, internal voices admitted defeat. A GOP strategist went viral saying, "This is what happens when you prep for a fight and your opponent preps for water." MSNBC ran extended coverage, calling it a debate masterclass. Democratic strategists quickly blasted out Crockett's clips in fundraising emails, and the results were immediate. Donations surged. Speaking invitations poured in. Party leaders began citing her performance as a model for media strategy. Within 48 hours, 3 Republican governors canceled scheduled debates with House Democrats. Behind closed doors, panic spread. The Republican Governors Association circulated a 15-page memo titled "Lesson from Arkansas." It was blunt. The memo identified 3 failures. First, Sanders' team hadn't studied Crockett's legislative record, missing her role in laws Arkansas depended on. Second, they overlooked Arkansas's own federal filings. Third, they trained Sanders to attack, not defend. Democrats moved quickly to formalize Crockett's approach. The DCCC produced a training guide called the Crockett Method, outlining her tactics. Anticipate talking points, document contradictions, let your opponent overcommit, then counter with receipts. Academia soon followed. Harvard's Kennedy School invited both women for a seminar. Sanders declined. Crockett accepted. Georgetown launched a course analyzing the debate, calling it a defining example of the modern political environment where facts outweigh theatrics. At the London School of Economics, scholars praised the debate for showing how traditional status is being replaced by demonstrated competence. Back home, Sanders faced steep fallout. Her PAC donations dropped 40% that month. Key Arkansas donors began pulling support. Her national prospects dimmed as doubts grew over her readiness for policy-heavy debates. Local papers, once supportive, published harsh editorials questioning whether she understood her own legislation. Meanwhile, Crockett's standing soared. Her fundraising set records, drawing contributions from all 50 states, including moderates, independents, and first-time Democratic donors. The reason cited: she came with facts. The policy ripple was immediate. Republican lawmakers across several states ordered reviews of their education bills. Governors in Florida, Texas, and Georgia requested audits to check for contradictions with federal funding rules. Some education bills were quietly withdrawn. Democrats, energized by Crockett's example, launched a new research unit to identify Republican inconsistencies. Their first target, Tennessee, produced another public embarrassment when similar contradictions surfaced in hearings. For Sanders, the personal impact was clear. She began refusing live interviews, and her staff imposed strict vetting on all public appearances. Crockett, in contrast, leaned into visibility. She appeared regularly on conservative networks, debating hosts while staying steady under pressure. Democratic leadership quickly took note. Crockett was soon invited into high-level strategy meetings, praised by leaders like Nancy Pelosi, and placed at the center of midterm fundraising campaigns. Her rise wasn't just about going viral. It was about reshaping the rules of engagement. Journalists adapted quickly. Debate coverage shifted from surface commentary to substance. More outlets began employing real-time fact-checkers. Producers stopped booking guests who couldn't explain their policies. Politicians were now expected to come prepared, or risk being Crockett. Campaign advisors across the country took notice. The era of coasting on charisma was over. Preparation mattered. Knowledge mattered. And in an environment where a single clip can define a career, no one wanted to be the next candidate caught unprepared. The Sanders-Crockett debate didn't just make headlines. It rewrote the modern political playbook.